Welcome back to the Indiana Football Signing Day special. We've talked a little bit of offense, a little bit of defensive, at least in the backfield, and now we're going to go in the trenches, talk offensive line, defensive line, and more signees that have come in here on National Signing Day. We're joined on set by offensive line coach Greg Frey, Larry McDaniel on defensive line, and Coach Inge, the linebackers coach. Guys, another great signing class that's going to come in and boost the momentum that's happening here in Bloomington over the last couple of years and under Coach Wilson. And Coach Inge, just with the recruiting process, it's a year-long thing. You know, you get one signing day to bring everybody in, but this is a 365-day activity, and oftentimes it comes down to the final hour. But this class that came in, it's a great group of guys on the defensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. We feel very happy with the young men that we were able to sign this year, and we look forward to their development. We garner their leadership, and we think that there's going to be some enthused energy with Coach Allen being here as the new defensive coordinator and having some of those young men come into the program under Coach Wilson. There's going to be some excitement that's going to be well warranted when they come into the quarry here.
We'll break down some of the individuals here in just a couple of minutes. And Coach McDaniel, what was the general focus for you when you went out searching for defensive linemen that are in this class?
Well, one of the things that we had to do was we had to replace some of the size that we were losing inside with Darius leaving and Darius Rayner leaving as well. But we also had to really address the needs as far as the pass rush that we were going to lose with Nick Mangieri and Zach Shaw. So those were the two big issues that we wanted to address throughout the process.
And Coach Frey, back to the offensive line, and we had Coach Johns, McCullough, and Pat, and some of the other guys on the offense on earlier, and just talking about the general success that the offense had with the passing, rushing, receiving, all types of numbers. But your group and the offensive line were just so dominant this year with the guys like Jason Spriggs, who's moving on to the next level, Dan Feeney, both All-Americans after this year. The offensive line group just did such a nice job to boost what Indiana was able to do offensively this past year.
Yeah, you know, those guys work hard. And the 4-year run that Jason had and Dan's in currently, you know, he got hurt that 1 year. But the 4-year run that Jason put together, it's got to be one of the better offensive runs of any left tackle going through the Big Ten. And so, you know, I'd like to see historically how some of the running and the passing stats and those things that Jason was able to accomplish through his time, you know, stand up. I know in Indiana history probably is one of the better ones.
And with the older guys like a Jason Spriggs, a Dan Feeney, those are the guys that really set the tone for even the guys that we mentioned on the show last year that are now freshmen, have 1 year under their books. And it's created an offensive line group that you have your starters, but if somebody goes down, or a next man up type mentality, just this offensive group, whether it's a senior or a freshman, anybody can be able to get in there, step up, and do their job.
Well, you know, when they bought into a culture that they couldn't see and they couldn't feel. They bought into what they were being taught in that room. And so it was faith-based because there's never been an offense like that at Indiana. They didn't have anybody to compare it to. They had nobody to follow the footsteps of. And so what Jason was able to do and what Dan was able to do, they've blazed a trail for Brandon Knight, for Simon Stepniak, for Coy Crunk, who we're going to talk about here, McKenzie. You know, those guys coming in, those guys can actually see the fruits of the labor, where Jason and Dan just came in and we told them what we could do, and they believed us and worked hard and never questioned and was able to accomplish some great things.
Coach Frey, you mentioned Coy Cronk, and he's going to be our first individual that will start to break down. Another kid out of Indiana, Lafayette Central Catholic High School, 6'5", 272. He's ranked one of the top prospects in this home state of Indiana.
Yeah, you know, he's actually 279 now. But they, you know, Coy reminds me a lot of what we saw in Jason, what we saw in Dan. He's athletic. He bends well. You know, he's a catcher. He's one of the top catching prospects, you know, probably out there. You know, and you know, fell in love with playing football. He's a physical kid, finishes plays. You know, played for a state champion, has a high expectation. High competitive side. You know, so it's one of those things where, you know, the things you look for, the intangibles in recruiting. Yeah, he played 1 year of O-line, but that really doesn't matter. We're going to teach him what he needs to know. His competitiveness, the way he attacks, the way he develops, what he wants out of this is what we were really attracted to, and you know, we think we found that in him.
Coy Cronk out of the home state of Indiana, up a couple hours north in Lafayette. Next up on the list, Mackenzie Wara out of Houston, Texas, another big guy on the offensive line, according to the list, 6'4", 305. What stuck out about him through the recruiting process?
Well, you know, he's such a good person, such a good kid. He's very, you know, very thorough in everything he does, whether it be playing O-line. You know, he was limited. He started playing he went to Manville High School, which is a powerhouse down there, and really he was going to be playing basketball, and they pulled him out of the gym. And so, you know, he fell in love with football. He started playing as a freshman, very mobile, finishes, you know, blocks, gets out there, you know, cares a lot, great teammate. You know, he's an international guy. You know, his family, you know, his dad, his lineage going back to, you know, Nigeria. Just a lot of interesting, great things about him. And like I said, you know, you got Coy, who's a very good athlete. You got Mackenzie, who's a very good athlete. Both of them are physical players, and that's really what we're looking for. You know, they're our kind of guys, and you know, and that's what we base our recruiting on.
Coach, at 6'5", Ryan Smith is next up. He is out of Loveland, Ohio, Moeller High School. Where does he fit into the mix as far as the signees?
You know, Ryan's going to project inside, guard center. You know, he got slowed a little bit in the senior year with a little bit of injury. But again, you know, when we look at offensive line, we're looking for, can they get to the blocks we want them to make? What do they do when they get there? What's their mentality as far as working, as far as attacking issues, as far as developing in the weight room? And these three guys all have the same molds. They're competitive players. They come from, you know, high expectation schools. When they get to the blocks, you know, they want to finish. They want to fight. They want to get after it. And so the core of what we look for in our offensive line recruiting, you know, they fit. The Jason Spriggs, the Dan Feeney's, you know, like I said, the past classes. These guys all fit right in, are gonna blend well.
It's a group of big guys as well. We mentioned Ryan at 6'5", 280 next up, and the final offensive lineman in this group stands at 6'6", and Grayson Stover. He's out of Spring Hill, Florida. So he also lettered, along with football, also lettered in weightlifting, which I didn't know, I guess, existed in all schools, but this is a big guy that's going to add to that offensive line.
You know, and Grayson comes from a program, an up-and-coming program down there, Hudson, who, you know, he's probably the highest rated player coming out of Hudson. You know, and his coach, you know, Coach Mailer and King, they did a great job of developing them. Usually, you know, you see kids like this transfer to other schools, and he didn't. He stayed to fight for the Cobras, and so you're seeing the biggest prospect, you know, as far as stature goes. He's probably closer to 6'6", to 300 now. You know, very strong kid, moves well, has a strong competitive nature, really wants to excel, and you know, to watch him and get to know him, he really, in my eyes, has been developing every day. Watching him in his All-Star game down there, watching that film, doing those things, you know, you're seeing a kid that really wants to be good, and he fits right in. Again, he's a big kid, mobile, physical, and has a high desire to be good.
Coach McDaniel, let's flip to the opposite side of the ball in your neck of the woods on the defensive line. Jerome Johnson, 6'3", 295 out of Massachusetts, led Bastfield High School to 4 straight state titles. Another guy that purely knows how to win ball games.
Yeah, it's out of Mississippi. You said Massachusetts.
Oh, excuse me, Mississippi.
That's okay. I wanted to make sure got that corrected. Yeah, Jerome's a big kid. Obviously, when we talked about our need to replace some of the size that we lost inside with Darius Rayner and Darius Latham. He was a young man that we found late, to be quite honest, but he is one of the best players down in the state of Mississippi. When you look at his stats, the other big thing about him is that he's a winner. He comes from a team that has won 4 state championships, so you can never undervalue the value of winning. So he's going to be a young man that's used to winning, coming in from a competitive program. He played in a couple of all-star games down there, and he's a big-time player coming out of there, and he gives us that size that we need on the inside.
Coach, also on that D-line, Alan Stallings, the 4th out of Maywood, Illinois, said teammates with Simi Cobbs, and a current Hoosier from the high school level, a 4-time wrestling state finalist. Does that add anything as well, just to on the defensive line, also a wrestler, knows how to get there in the trenches?
Well, to me it does, because I was wrestling in high school, so I'm a little biased toward those guys. Yes, you know, he's going to feel that need that we have to get some pressure off the edges. this year. Zach Shaw and Nick Mangieri both did a nice job. Obviously, Nick with garnering some all Big Ten honors. So we needed to get someone that could replace those guys on the edge. And when you watch his tape, you'll see that. He's a very explosive, very passionate player, really plays with a high motor. And obviously with him being a Midwestern kid, you know, he's used to playing in the elements that we're going to play in. So he's a good get for us, and we look for him to come in and compete early.
Coach Inge, as you coach your linebackers, you've adopted with your position group that gladiator mentality. So as you go out in the recruiting process, what types of guys specifically are you looking for that, aside from maybe the strength numbers, the speed numbers, but what are some of the intangibles that you may look for throughout the recruiting process?
Well, probably one of the number one intangibles is you're going to have to be tough. You're going to have to be tough to do the hard things, because often that's what football is. It's not going to be 70 and sunny all the time. When it's warm, when it's hot, when you need to make a play, we're looking for those guys that are going to make that play. And that's why if I'm a 2017 recruit, I know for sure I'm looking into Indiana, because it wasn't a major priority for us to get one at this point in time this year, but we're going to be moving forward because some of the young men that we're going to talk about are getting a little older. And it's going to be time for those young men to fight. So toughness, men of great character, and great teammates. I would say those would be three intangibles for sure that we're looking for as we move forward looking at 2017 recruits.